Welcome to She's a Full-On Monet, a digital lifestyle magazine for women. Every week, our editor-in-chief, Kelly Castillo, along with Megan Block and special guests, participate in a deep dive discussion about recent articles and topics we have covered. We invite you to become part of our community where everyone's welcome. You can totally sit with us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to She's a Full-On Monet. I'm your host, Kelly, and I have with me, as always, Megan.
Hi.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you. Yes, it's been a little bit.
Yeah.
We thank you guys for your patience as we're figuring out our recording schedule.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Things are just a little bit crazy right now, and we want to make sure that we produce valuable and solid content for you guys. So we appreciate everybody's patience.
Absolutely. Well, I just went on my very first vacation in a very, very long time. We went on a family vacation and I just missed my kids start school tomorrow. So it was couldn't be closer to the date, but there's something about, you can attest to this. There's something about going on vacation that just refreshes every single part of you. But I've also learned, and you also can attest to this, that being a mom on vacation is just parenting in a different location. It's not the worst, but it's definitely not vacation. You see it in the movies.
Exactly. The only difference is if you're staying in a hotel and eating all your meals out, it's a little bit different because there's just less cleanup and prep to do. But if you're staying we always stayed in houses when the kids were small because it's easier. But yeah, it's just all the same chores, but in a different spot.
But there's a sense of entitlement that the kids bring with them. I will not clean up after myself. I will ask for more things than I would ever ask. It's like when you take a kid to a theme park, there's a whole new mindset that goes into play. But I'm just
vacation mind.
I feel semi-refreshed, but I also feel I didn't stop. So anyway, I just thought I know a mom agrees with this statement.
Absolutely. Well, I think today's topic is really interesting. And, I would hope that it doesn't ring true to too many of our listeners, just because I hope they haven't had to experience this, but it is something that I think everyone probably goes through. I know for me, those years were when I was younger and kind of learning what my boundaries were and learning what I wanted, what I didn't want. But I think that's probably pretty natural. And it's an interesting topic. We've had a lot of articles about it, especially guest articles from some people who have a really good insight into this. And so I think it's an interesting thing to discuss because it's kind of a little bit subjective too, because not everybody has the same idea of what this means. And some relationships, which we're talking today about toxic relationships and specifically recovering from toxic relationships. And I know for myself, something that I would find that works for me and is tolerable and is comfortable might to someone else be intolerable. And maybe even they would use the word toxic. So everybody's threshold is different and comfort level is different. It's kind of our internal thermostat or whatever. We all have our own comfortable spot.
Yes. And it's as everything in life, it's all based on whatever childhood trauma we went through and what we maybe witnessed our parents do, or how, for me, I'm a total people pleaser. And so I will let things slide maybe more than others will, or I'll stay in a relationship or a friendship longer than, I'll ignore signs or give second chances or whatever. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's based on who you are, what you've been through, what your internal thermostat, whatever that is kind of how you read into this article and what you take away from it and how you alter your courses.
Absolutely. I have friends who, grew up in families where communication was debate and raised voices, but not angry. That's just how they talk as a family. They're all, I want to say the word loud, but that kind of has a negative context.
Very defensive.
Yeah, or they just love to get into debates at every holiday gathering, and whether it's politics, sports, or whatever it is.
Heaven forbid there's alcohol involved too. It really gets it going.
But they're enjoying it. It's their bonding and their interaction.
It's their way of communicating.
Yeah, and I have some friends who, as a couple, they just, they at home they're yelling back and forth to each other from different sides of the house, and they love to get kind of and again, like a debate or a big discussion over things. And
it's really funny. I know what you're saying. And like my friend and I will look at each other when our mutual friend is doing it with her husband. I'll be like, oh my gosh, mom and dad are fighting again. Like, that's how they communicate, but it's almost like, I want to go away right now,
Yeah, because I'm like hypersensitive to that. I don't like raised voices in my house. My house is really quiet. And even if my husband is, comes home from work where his intensity level is really high and he stays at that intensity level, I have to tell him like, you go back outside and like chill it out and then come back. Cause I
don't think I've ever heard you raise your voice, and I've known you for a very long time. You tend to go the opposite direction because you know that it evens it out and calms. Like you're always the very calm force in the room,
Yeah. The stiller my face gets and the more even my voice gets, the more upset I am. And and so I do get angry, and I have my moments where I say things that are not the kindest end of the spectrum, but I always say them with a super even tone and in a quiet voice, which I think kind of makes it worse.
I was just gonna say it makes it worse. I've heard you. I'm not gonna lie. I've heard you on the phone with and I've heard the opposite be done, and it makes it calm because they want you to meet them at their level of insanity. Mm-hmm. And when you're not, it's very disruptive.
Right. I agree. And when someone's really emotionally upset and angry, if you rise to that level and you engage at that same volume and intensity, then it's the blame is equal. Where if I stay calm and don't get emotional and don't react, then that the person who lost their temper is clearly the person. I like to be right, I guess is where I'm going with this. I like to be right. I like to be the bigger person.
Well, there's just, you also, I feel like, that like, I think it's having 4 children helps. Like, that like that doesn't result in anything being resolved. So it's like, what's the point? Like, it's exhausting and you're protective of your energy. And I think that's good.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely am.
Yeah.
And I mean, but I have friends who have partnerships, and relationships where they're very evenly matched and their skill set is very evenly matched, and they really are partners with each other. Like they both take on all the same, like the financial responsibility and the household tasks, and they really split things in half, and that works so well for them. And they have this really great equal partnership. And I love that, but that's not my reality. And, I do everything basically. And my husband does all the financial, and that's what works for us. But I know people who look at our situation and are like, I can't believe you do everything. And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm hyper independent and I don't actually like people helping me. I tend to be like, if just get out of my way, I can do it. And I'm not saying that's healthy, but for me, it's not toxic. But I can understand for someone who has an expectation of a really equal shared load of work partnership, that would be toxic. They would be looking at their partner who is not engaging in anything having to do with home life. And they would be like, this is not tolerable. This is toxic. For me, it actually works really well. And my husband does offer to help all the time. And I literally tell him, no, go sit down. So it's on me. It's not that he doesn't offer. It's that I genuinely, again, like you said, childhood trauma, I am hyper independent. I know that is a trauma response. And I tend to think that I'm the only one able to do things the right way, which is also not super great. But
it's also not uncommon. I'm literally the same way. I used to be the type where I felt like I needed to rely on my person for certain things. But now I'm kind of thriving on doing things alone or seeing what I can do on my own. It's almost like a challenge, and I really thrive on adding to the list of things that I have successfully done on my own. And it's just like, I don't know, maybe the older you get, the more that becomes a cool thing. But like, I've now decided instead of asking for help to try and do things on my own, Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. So
I think, if you're going to like try to figure out how to define if a relationship is toxic for you, because it is such an individual thing, it's really going to come down to, if you feel like your feelings were validated in the relationship, if you feel like your needs were met in the relationship and your boundaries were not crossed on a on, a regular basis. I think those are the things to kind of the measure stick,
Yeah.
Because everybody has different emotional needs and needs in general. And some people, do have a different expectations. And so something that might really work for someone might be considered toxic for someone else. And that's why it has to be an individual assessment. And that's also why, if you leave a relationship and you voice your opinion that relationship was toxic for you, that's your opinion is the only opinion that should be weighed in that, because other people can tell you, oh, it wasn't that bad. At least, it wasn't this, or at least it wasn't that, or try to kind of one up you in the negative relationship, like it's a contest. And that's not helpful, first of all, and that's invalidating your feelings, all of that.
What about when people weigh in on your relationship and call it toxic when you don't necessarily see it that way?
Yeah, that's the other side of that coin. That's exactly my point. I have people ask me all the time, like, I don't know how you do it. Or they'll even say, I don't know how you put up with him, with my partner. And I'm like, wow, that's rude. I chose him.
That's a very bold thing to say to someone.
They always say it like jokingly, but it's not funny to me because
where's the joke?
Where's the joke? And the truth is that nobody knows what happens behind closed doors. It looks on the outside that, I do everything and my husband doesn't support me at all. And that's not true. He's super supportive of me emotionally. He is, extremely obviously supportive of me financially. He's here for me in ways that nobody sees because it happens, in the privacy of our own home. And I have boundaries that other people might call needs. Like, I don't necessarily want someone to help me in my day-to-day tasks. I find it kind of intrusive, and I know other people do want help with that. Or like, I don't know, over engagement in my life. Like, I like for him to be there, and I like for us to do things together, but I also have my own interests and my own life, and I don't necessarily want him with me 24/7, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. And if you lived through the pandemic and had to be with your partner 24/7, you know exactly what we're talking about, because we all deserve to have not like this separate identity or separate life, but not everything that you are involved in or you do needs to be something your partner is involved in. And if that's
Absolutely.
your dynamic and you guys are like really happy about that, because I do know some people that like, they're like literally like attached to the hip. If that's your dynamic and that works for you and you're already doing that, cool, rock that. But like, that's not a requirement. You should have, I know if my husband tried to be like into all the things I was into, holy moly. Like, first of all, that's a lot. Secondly, like that would, I don't know. I like my separation. I don't know. I like it.
I do too.
Feel like I'm a better person, and we have similar interests that we merge together, but we also have very different interests that would never, like, I try and like football. Like I try and find his interest, but I'm also okay with not forcing things that are just not, like, I don't try and put myself in all parts of his life.
That's exactly what it is. I work from home, and my partner is semi-retired, so he's home most of the time. And we spend a lot of time together, but he loves riding his horses. He does it almost every day. And can't tell you how many times people have asked me, why don't you start riding horses? Then you guys could ride together. And I'm like, but that's his thing. And he enjoys his own. Even if I was to start riding horses, we wouldn't be riding in the same discipline,
side by side, like they do in the movies,
and holding hands. Like, what?
Although that would be cute, but like that's not what's happening.
It's not what's happening. And I enjoy that he takes those couple of hours and goes and does that, and it allows me to catch up on other things that I'm doing and to have some time alone. And and it's healthy, I think. I don't think anybody has the right to tell you that what's healthy for you.
It's a marathon, okay? We're in it for a while to get. At some point, we're going to be those people who are literally sitting next to each other in different seats, like in the living room, because the kids are super gone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we have a long time to spend every flipping minute with each other. It's cool to take some time away, like...
Our entire relationship, we've worked together. We've been together most of the time, but the kids are out of the house now. And also, I mean, honestly, my husband is 20 plus years older than me. I have to be able to do everything on my own because eventually I probably will have to. And I have to be comfortable spending time alone because that's just the reality of it is, women live longer than men usually anyway. And he's already 20 plus years older than me. So there's a good chance that I'll be on my own for a significant period of time. And if I had never spent any time alone and all my hobbies were shared with him and I didn't know how to do all of the things that how would I survive
life? Yeah.
How would I
that goes with anything in life. If you overdo anything, it's like you got to have a healthy mix of a few things, right? In order to be like well-rounded, because the minute that is taken away from you, it's like shock, and to the system, and you don't really know who you are. You're kind of like looking at yourself like, what do I do? And those moments are also really great because you can reinvent yourself and figure who you are out again. That happened to me with the pandemic, and I completely shifted, my passions and tried to figure out what really truly made me happy. But at the same time, when it comes to a relationship, if everything is so weaved in with each other that you don't really know how to separate, or like, oh my gosh, those like friends that you have where like they're checking in with their significant other every 2 seconds, or like they don't really know how to like be away from each other. They don't like the girls' night out feels super foreign to them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it kind of makes me think of that Julia Roberts movie, Runaway Bride.
Yeah.
She did not even know how she liked her eggs cooked because she always ordered them with whoever she was with at the time. She ordered whatever they ordered. And so she goes to the diner and she orders every different possible way of cooking eggs so that she can figure it out.
Yes. Uh-huh.
She had lost her identity completely. So that's another important point that I want to make. If you have determined that you're in a relationship that's toxic for you, it doesn't have to mean that the person you're in the relationship with is a toxic person.
Absolutely not.
They could be a super perfect person for somebody else. And what they bring out in you might be what's toxic, or the fact that they aren't able to meet your emotional needs might be what's toxic, but it doesn't have to be that they are toxic.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're just maybe, things match in certain areas, but the things that really matter to your soul, the ones that are going to like keep you long-term happy, the little red flags that you might be ignoring because it's just like, you don't want to be that person to be like, it's not you, it's me, those are the ones you got to really listen to because you deserve ultimate happiness. And that goes for every single person. And that doesn't mean you have like the person that they have to be perfect for you. Now, does everything about them have to match? No, but they have to be willing to kind of meet you in the middle. Dan and I have been together for a very long time, and there were certain things that he brought into the relationship that I told him were kind of like triggers of childhood trauma. And he knew that they were super important to me. And he just adjusted the way he handled certain situations because he didn't want to intentionally bring out trauma in me, and so if they're willing to meet you in the middle, you know what I mean? That's
exactly the definition.
Yeah.
That's exactly the definition of someone meeting your emotional needs, even if they have to adjust their own behaviors. And now nobody should try to become somebody they're not in order to meet another person's emotional needs. And I think deep down, if we're listening to our gut instinct and the little voice in our head, we know when something's not right, when it's not meant for us.
Yeah.
Relationships are hard work, but you shouldn't have to try to make the pieces fit. It's just, maintaining something that already works. That is the effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think we know. And the thing is, we're all kind of afraid of being alone, and that's a normal thing. But you can't find what's meant for you if you hold on to what isn't, and it isn't, and you're just too afraid of the alternatives.
Now, we all have bad seasons though, too. The relationship could become toxic because of a certain thing that happened in our person's life, whether it's like a friend or a loved one or our partner or whatever. Sometimes sticking it out through the season is one thing, but if it really becomes something where it's like really toxic to you as a person, then that's, and it's long term, we all, like I said, we all deserve ultimate happiness, but sometimes like our person gets hit with something they were not expecting, and they might not be handling it the way that they should. And then all of a sudden the relationship becomes toxic because of something that was out of their hands, you know?
We could say that someone whose partner is battling cancer or severe depression is in a toxic relationship.
Loss of a parent suddenly,
yeah.
you know, can
and
change.
is that true? Probably. But it's not a circumstance that they can control. And it's something that hopefully they're able to work their way through. So that's really a question you have to search your heart for, whether or not you're able to stick it out and be patient with that process. It also depends on, you know, how long you've been with that person and the dynamic before that happened and what your ultimate goals are. And, you know, it's a
meeting in the middle. Like when my mom passed away suddenly, you know, my relationship with Dan had been like 3 years in, and I was very toxic at that time, but I knew that I had to work through my demons, and he knew he had to stick with me through working through it. It was like a meeting of the middle. And then we came out of it knowing that we could handle hard things. So there is always a blessing out of those moments, but you know, in your gut when like, it's just been too long and now you're just like a beating mat for all of their issues and all of their traumas. And that's also not okay. And that can be a non-romantic relationship. Your best friend could be going through something tough. And all of a sudden they're like, totally using you for an emotional beat, you know what I mean? And that's not okay. But they also may not have ever been through something like this before and may not know what like the right way to handle a sudden death in the family or sudden medical news that is traumatic. You know what I mean? So it's I guess it's a gut thing. I don't know. I don't know the answer to it.
I don't either. I mean, I think if you are feeling that your whatever relationship it is, like you said, it doesn't have to be romantic, is making you feel like unsupported, attacked, boundaries are getting crossed on a regular basis. You know, there's kind
using
you, or you feel demeaned in some way. That's the time to kind of examine that. And obviously that's the first step to recovering from a toxic relationship, is accepting that the relationship is toxic for you and making that decision to make changes in your life. That's probably the hardest step for most people.
Yeah. Facing it is hard because, you know, the minute that you ignore it, then it becomes like not an issue. But the minute that you are like aware of the issue, it's hard to ignore it.
Right. And then, I mean, accepting that and leaving the situation, there is, you know, obviously regret, there's shame, there's, you know, guilt. Bad feelings, there's guilt, there's a lot of tied emotions to that, you know, will have to be worked through, because nothing happens in a vacuum. Every relationship is two-sided. So there's some, you know, some examination of your responsibility for how you ended up in that situation. And whether it's, you know, choosing the wrong partner or allowing boundaries to be crossed that should have held firm, or not leaving when you got the first signal that something was very, very bad.
We always look back and reflect, right?
Yeah. And I'm not like victim blaming at all. I always look at every situation in my life and try to examine what my percentage of responsibility is, just because that's how I grow and that's how I avoid repeating the same mistakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, you know, once you have done that self-examination and you've taken, okay, this is the lesson I'm learning from this. This is what I can do differently to hopefully avoid the situation in the future. Once you've finished that, then you have to just forgive yourself for whatever.
Yeah. You can't let it spiral or spin, especially if you're an overthinker. You're never going to move on, you know?
Yeah.
You have to start to forgive yourself. Forgiving yourself is a big process too, as well as acceptance, because it's easier said than done. Right.
Yes. It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Forgiving yourself is really hard, especially if, you know, you were raised in a way that thinks, you know, divorce is inherently bad, or you have small children that, you know, there's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of self-guilt for sure. And then there's a lot of anger at yourself, angry at your partner, anger at, you know, the people who enabled the relationship, because there tends to be, beyond just the two people in the relationship, there tends to be a circle around it of people who, you know, maybe have been telling you for years, this is not great for you, or enabled it and said, oh, it's not that bad. Or, you know, even like, I know when I went through my first divorce, we had other couple friends, and it was so difficult to navigate that because there was a dynamic in our social circle where the wives would kind of complain a little bit about their husbands, which is normal, like girl talk. And then when I had made the decision to divorce that person, suddenly my complaining had a much sharper edge to it, looking back for them. And they weren't getting divorced. They had been complaining the same level as me, but they weren't getting divorced. So they were suddenly very standoffish and uncomfortable. I don't know if people think that is contagious, that divorce is
No, it's like almost like, well, first, yeah, you're doing the thing that they were like secretly maybe they wanted to, or it's like they don't know, they feel like they have to take a side. I think it's odd that people feel like they have to be like team this or team that when you can't just be supportive or just sweeten through the whole process, just mutual the whole way through, you know, like, and because really it's what she's saying and what he's saying and then what's really happening. Right. So no couple's friends should know so much detailed information that they have like a sure side one way or another. So just, you know, just be supportive and be open and be there for that person on both sides, because then it's just, you don't know who's really there for you or what team they're on until they have to pick a side, right? And then it's like when the line in the sand is drawn, which by the way, it's never really actually drawn. People think it's drawn, I'm guessing. They feel like they have to choose between a side. Or if they hear something that they think is true, then all of a sudden they're like, well, I can't be friends knowing this now. You know, it's like, I know too much. Oh, you know too much of what the person that I'm divorcing is saying to you? How interesting, you know? It's just weird how people get very like, they think they know so much about something they shouldn't or probably don't know anything about, you know?
Exactly.
I just think general support the whole way through should be what should happen.
Yeah. And I mean, if you again, we don't know what happens behind closed doors. If someone we care about is making an announcement that they're leaving a toxic relationship, whether that's, you know, a roommate, friend, romantic, whatever, we just have to trust that they know what's best for them. Because I mean, how arrogant of us to think that we know better what's best for someone than they know. I mean, that's crazy.
It's actually happened where like, they're not my close friends, but I've seen people who have been in a relationship for a long time, like split up online. Like they'll announce that they're splitting up and I'll be like, oh, something must have happened or this, like, and I'll find out that the other person is coming out as a gay person. It's like, oh, it had nothing to do with anything toxic going on in a relationship. They just discovered who they truly were and they're friends now. And we should be like, you know, it's like, don't make judgments on people ever, even if you know most of the story.
No,
because the story is still fluffed for
we never know
general knowledge. So
we never know what people are struggling with in private. We really don't.
Yes.
So I think the whole toxic relationship, kind of the imprint that it leaves on us, is something that really benefits from professional help to walk through. Because asking yourself those hard questions of how did I get into this situation that turned so toxic? Why did I allow X, Y, Z to happen? I feel like I have these hard boundaries, but yet in this circumstance, I just watched them fall away like so much dust in the wind, right? Like, what was that about? I think talking to a professional and getting some, you know, guidance as you walk your way through the process and talk your way through the process is so beneficial. Because
absolutely, if anything, they will be able to pinpoint exactly where in your childhood this is coming from. Because like, I know like that my people pleasing came from like my mom, me feeling like I always needed to like show my mom that I was capable of doing all these things. Like I never felt like I was ever like good enough in her eyes. And I'm sure that was not the case. I'm sure she thought I was amazing. It was just my perception. Right. So it's like, now that I know that, because talking to a therapist and talking through some things, now I can change my behaviors and change my standards of how I walk on this earth and how I associate with others and how I allow myself to be treated by other people, you know, because you don't really know, like you can ask yourself the hard questions, but having someone, an unbiased professional opinion help you through that process is a much different experience and something that honestly you're worth putting yourself through. And with therapy now, there's so many methods and how to go about doing it. You can do it like you and I are doing with a Zoom, a phone call, text messages. You don't have to like go in and lay down on the couch and like, you know, share your whole life story, but you will find a method that is best suited for you and your time frame. But most importantly, you're worth that, you know, because one toxic relationship will turn into a few more, and then
Exactly.
it's a pattern. And, if you're really out there trying to find the partner meant for you that best suits all of the needs, that's checking all your boxes off. Like you mentioned, people don't really know how your dynamic works with your partner, but he checks all of your boxes that are your needs, that are your core needs that mean the most to you. So everything works in your system, and screw what other people think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if
that's
you don't,
not toxic. That's knowing what you want and knowing that you're satisfied, like truly, truly satisfied. And if no one understands that, that's also okay. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't understand your own like mental workings and what got you there, and you don't heal it and resolve it, then you're just going to pick a relationship that's like an exact mirror image of that.
You're just going to be grasping and trying new things and seeing what works. And like, who wants to do that either? If you do the hard, dirty work and figure out who you are and get through those blocks that are there, instead of just like gravitating to different types of people or the same type of person, then you'll be able to find those core relationships that are there for the long haul, that will be there for you in the ways that you need them to be.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that one of the biggest indicators of a toxic relationship is someone who doesn't validate your feelings and gaslights you. So you may have been there in that situation for so long that you're not even aware of some of the ways that you've been hurt by the relationship, because you were made to think that was your issue. You were crazy. That never happened. So talking with a professional and talking through it and actually opening those scenarios back up and examining them in a more neutral place would be so beneficial to healing. Yeah. So that you don't make the same mistakes.
Yes, because then they can also give you some guidance on what to do next. There's only so much like journaling and self-discovery and watching and reading Pinterest quotes can do. You need to actually figure out what do I do next? I now understand that this relationship has become toxic. How do I separate, especially if you yourself are non-confrontational, or if you're a people pleaser, you may not have ever had to break off a relationship of any sort. You may not know how to do it. And so, you don't want to leave a trauma with that person either. You don't want to, and they, like you said, might be a completely amazing, great person, just not a good fit for you. So you don't want to create a trauma because you're realizing that you're in a toxic relationship and you now need to move forward in a different way, because definitely we know ghosting is not the way to do it. There's ways not to separate the situation, because that's not helpful either.
Yeah, absolutely. It can really, you can just injure and wound yourself again by focusing on the wrong things. And especially if you try to navigate it yourself without any kind of help. And I mean, I know, times are really difficult right now, but there are some really cost-effective, reasonable ways to do that. There are, online therapy platforms, which I know we've talked about before. There are, support groups that are free that meet in different communities all around the country all the time, depending on what exactly the background of the situation was or what your specific traumas are. And, there's also a million really great podcasts out there where people with really specialized training. I mean, some of the people who have podcasts now are like amazing psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists with these great backgrounds that we would never be able to go and make an appointment with in real life, maybe because we live in a small town or we don't have the finances, or they're, not those resources available to us. And they discuss all of these topics. And I mean, some of that is going to resonate with you and help you.
I can tell you that got me through. I'd never, my marriage was rocky during the pandemic, and those podcasts really got me through it. Not because they were like life altering, but they had me see certain things in a way that made me realize a lot of the patterns that were being created were because of me, or things that it helped me see things in a different perspective, that And they are like the top people in their field that I would never have access to, never be able to make an actual in-person appointment with. And no, I wasn't able to give my personal story to them. I wasn't able to answer questions, but just listening to them and hearing their perception on very specific topics. Like you can go in a podcast and find a, for instance, marriage counselor, and they go in topic by topic, like how to handle this, how to handle that. And you can get very, very specific help on your very specific problem. If that's what you're looking for free. Like if you have an iPhone, you have a library already of just like so much help that costs absolutely nothing. And that was my favorite part, was that I could get help in a matter that was possibly breaking my family up, the most important thing in my world. But I didn't feel like I had the money at the time to go give, or the world was shut down, couldn't meet someone, but I had this in my control, and I'm all about what can I control. Right. So, podcasts are great, and they really did help. I started to apply some of the things that they said, and it really changed the way my husband and I started to communicate to each other. He felt heard, he felt understood, and then I started to feel heard and understood. It started to really, like, he started to see an evolvement in me that was good, because I was getting rid of the toxic patterns that was causing our relationship to deteriorate. So podcasts saved my marriage. Okay. I'm not kidding. They really are powerful. So if you're somebody who really is like, no, I have negative money in my bank account, just go look in your phone and go look up podcasts. And these people, like you said, are the top people in their field. They're not joking around. They know what they're talking about. And it helps if you apply it.
It really does. It makes a huge difference. I mean,
sometimes you're the toxic person in the relationship, and you don't know it until you're like, oh, wait, I thought you were the problem. I'm the problem, you know? You can change and alter some stuff.
Right. And I think it's important to say that, because it's easy sometimes when you're starting to build like anger and resentment to just kind of snowball that until you decide, oh, it's toxic. And maybe it's not. Maybe, I mean, for sure there's a lot that is. So, really
but sometimes you are leaving and eliminating people in your life that are amazing people that could have been that person, because you are refusing to see what's truly the problem, and it's you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to say that's for every situation, but sometimes, like, the way I was communicating to my husband was so toxic, and I was seeing it from such a lens of it's you, or it's when you say this, it brings this part out. It's such like a deflecting of actual acceptance of responsibility, that it was causing him to really resent the relationship. You know, I was, for whatever reason, bringing in toxic behaviors into the relationship that I wasn't even aware of until I started to listen to these podcasts and realize that, wow, the way I'm communicating is like so toxic. But we're so in our own heads that we don't even realize that we're harming others by how we're communicating, that sometimes we don't realize we're the toxic person. And then people are just not willing to sit through that forever, right? So then they leave, and months down the road later, you realize you're the problem and it's too late. So
yeah, because someone exactly like what you're saying. Sometimes the person is behaving out of character for them because they are reacting to you, and you're crossing their boundaries, and you're invalidating their feelings.
Absolutely.
I mean, arguing and using statements like "you always" and "you never"
so childish,
are so unproductive, or bringing up things that are old things that happened years ago, and the person has apologized for and thought that you moved on, and then you get an argument, you bring it up again. Super unhealthy behavior. Or just being not grateful for what that person in your life is bringing to the table. So that always helps me too, if I'm starting to feel that way, or I'm just having a bad day. Sometimes if I make a gratitude list, and sometimes I'll make it specific to one person in my life, like all the things I'm thankful for about that person. And I don't even have to be like upset with them to do that. Sometimes it's just a good practice.
Absolutely.
And it helps to remind you that while no one is perfect, no one's going to check every box for you. Sometimes that person is bringing a lot of really positive aspects to your life, and you've only been focusing on what's lacking. So if you have that
lens you've chosen to look through, right?
Yeah. And if you have that mindset of lack, it's really hard to treat that person respectfully and joyfully and build a connection, because you're just looking at what they don't bring.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's life's a journey, right? We're all just trying to survive it all and be decent people as best we can, And so sometimes you think you're in a toxic relationship and you have this realization that maybe there are things that you are doing that are causing toxicity to just occur. And you can salvage that, because sometimes those relationships, that friendship, that, marriage, that whatever it is, that partnership is so important. You can't replace people, and don't be so quick to write it off, but also be very aware of what you're willing to accept. My husband was just simply not willing to he was not willing to be treated like that anymore. And he didn't want to leave the relationship. He didn't want to leave the marriage. He didn't want to break up the family, but he also didn't want to wake up and be treated like dirt anymore or feel depressed. And I realized that I was causing like a reaction to his to his self and to his mentality. And that was like the cruelest thing. But it was a wake up call for me to realize that I needed to go in and do some work on myself before I started pointing fingers at everyone else, because maybe it wasn't anything they were doing. Maybe they were just simply reacting to something I was doing. So, it's a little bit of like self-discovery and just really looking at the situation, going, where is it coming from? But be willing to be humble enough to accept that maybe it's something you might be bringing to the table or doing or saying that might be causing that to come out.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really important. So, I mean, we talked about examining what your percentage of responsibility is, and that might be during that process might be when you figure out that the toxic person is actually you, and forgiving yourself for whatever that responsibility is, and letting go of those angry, resentful thoughts, because you can't build a happy life if you're in an angry mindset. It's just not possible. And that's the goal, right? If you're leaving something, it's to try to make a happier future for yourself. So you have to let go of the anger. You have to forgive. And, reaching out for help, professional help especially, but also whatever your support system is crucial. And it's going to take time, and you have to be patient with the process. It's a slow and steady healing, because nothing gets fixed overnight.
No.
However long the relationship was is how long the damage was done. And it's going to take at least half that amount of time to work your way through it.
When we all start in a relationship, whether it's a friendship, a working relationship, an actual like romantic relationship, there's always this amount of trust that's given out. And the minute that trust is broken on any level, whether they disappointed you, let you down, hurt you, whatever it is, then we're all just kids, right? That you remember what it feels like to have your friend hurt you for the first time. And it's just, you don't ever want to be in that situation, but you have to really examine it and make sure that it's going to be right for you long term, because no one's perfect. I'm just like, it's not finding the person that's never going to hurt you, but it's also making sure that it's like a healthy give and get relationship, then it's not toxic. It's a human relationship. No one's perfect, but also if, those things have to be tested too. I know friendships that I've been in that literally like we never fought once, and I'm like, I wonder what would happen if we fought. Or the relationships that we like fought about something, or we went through something hard and I knew that person like was still there after it, forgave me, like moved on, was willing to move forward. Like I realized that person could withstand a storm and still come out the other side. And I was like, cool, so like, I think that a relationship on any level needs a little bit of a jumble in there to see what it is exactly. But if it comes out and the person just like completely ghosts you, or they gaslight you, or make you feel really, really small for whatever happened, or like, signs, right? And that's when you start to realize that this might not be the right fit. So just, I don't know, be willing to have your heart open, but be awake.
Yeah,
I guess
exactly.
is the best way to put it. Because like no one's perfect and we all go through tough stuff, but we all deserve happiness. We all deserve to be treated with respect. And we all deserve to be treated on a certain level of like love that is being given and being
reciprocated. Yeah. And we are the only people who get to make that equation, who get to set that barometer. Mm-hmm. We are the only people who get to decide what that looks like for us. And no one else gets to say that because it's so individual, like the
Absolutely.
thermostat setting. It's so individual.
Yes. Like if somebody's telling you something's toxic, maybe like listen to what they're saying, but they have no right to tell you, like what they see as toxic might not be what you see as toxic versus if you think something's toxic and you're telling somebody about it and they're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Well, who are you to say that? You're not in the relationship. It's not your life. So yeah, just, what's right for you and what you're willing to stand for and make the best decision for you.
Exactly. That's the bottom line.
Protect your inner peace. Protect yourself, right?
Yes.
That's what they say. Protect your peace. Because yes, there's a level of BS we all bring to the table in relationships, but no one deserves their peace to be completely just depleted by one person,
Yeah. And I have I think we all do an emotional energy reserve of, a gas tank, whatever, of emotional energy. And certain people that I've met in my life, they tend to come in and they're like energy vampires, just for me particularly, and they suck that out. And so I protect my energy and I keep
some of those people you cannot avoid. I call them my children, and I have to deal with their but there's some people that it's voluntary. I don't have to deal with it, right?
Right,
So
exactly.
Protect that peace. You only have so much.
And sometimes it's subtle, and it's not until you realize, wow, every time I'm around that person, I'm just not myself and I just don't feel great. And it doesn't need to be someone that you're having these knockdown, drag out arguments with. Sometimes it's just someone who doesn't reciprocate the relationship, doesn't do their part to maintain it.
Bringing out some underlying anxiety that you have.
Yeah.
Or triggers.
You're the friend that keeps the whole relationship, the whole friendship going. And if you don't call them, they never call you, and you set all the plans and you do all the things and it's never reciprocated. That's also a level of toxic because it makes you feel unappreciated.
And then you take that into every friendship and you feel like that's the standard. It's not,
It's not.
It should be equal.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Most of the time, again, with ebbs and flows, because life is not always static.
Nope. But at the same time, you should be willing to feel like that person is there for you. It's it's a gut. I feel like it's a gut thing. You just know, if a relationship is turning toxic and whether it can be salvaged based on all of the, details and evidence in front of you. So.
Okay. Well, I think we covered a lot today. But I haven't had a recent situation where I've been through this. So I would be really interested to hear other people's perspectives and how they discovered or came to understand that a relationship that they were having was toxic and what that looked like for them. Because I think some people who are in the thick of it, I use that analogy. It's like when you're carrying a really heavy backpack and you stop noticing it after a while. And then when you take a break and you set it down, you're like, oh my God. And you try to pick it back up again and you can't even pick it back up again. You have no idea how you didn't notice how heavy the stupid thing was. It's kind of like that. So when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to see. And sometimes it's hard to even understand. But when you're on the outside looking back, you're like, whoa, that was so messed up.
Yes.
So
yes, I would love to know what you did with it after you realized it. Because for me, do I get coffee with the person? Do I send a text message? I'm very much knowing that there's going to be some sort of defensive message coming back. What did you do with the information and how did you completely separate? Because it's easy to get sucked back in with people,
Yeah.
No one likes to be told they don't want to be friends with somebody or don't want to be with somebody anymore. They get really defensive and they will come up with all the excuses on how they'll change or whatever, So right. And how did you handle it?
Depending on how toxic the relationship got, it could be a situation that feels dangerous even to you. So I would be really interested to hear your guys' stories and how you healed from a toxic relationship. If you guys want to share, head over to Facebook and look for She's a Full-On Monet. We have our page there that has an associated discussion group. So we would love for you guys to tell us about your experiences. And again, we thank you for your patience. We are happy to be back, and we look forward to talking to you guys every week. And we thank you guys for coming back every week to hear us. if this is, if you enjoy our podcast, please like it, rate it, review it. You know all the things to do. Share it with friends because that's the best way kind of to get the word out there. All right. We will see you guys next week.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to bookmark our site, she'safullonmonet.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you're enjoying this podcast, it helps us a lot if you can follow, rate, and review. See y'all next week.